People are down on Drew Allar. And when I talk about people, I'm not talking about Penn State fans. Maybe they are as well, but I got to guess in pockets they're much more supportive. But people across the nation just think he's a major disappointment. I didn't see it quite that way, nor did I think he played well against Ohio State or Michigan in particular. So I'm not looking past that. Uh, I'm not putting this on you because you don't carry a crystal ball like none of us do. But I just don't think that people should be surprised if Drew Allar turns out to be everything he was forecasted to be this season. Give the guy a break. It's a pretty slim list of guys that are elite at the quarterback position in their first year at the quarterback position. The Trevor Lawrences and Deshaun Watsons only, walk the earth every so often. So now he's got a full year under his belt, another offseason to try to improve without having that game week preparation week after week to kind of get away from it and work back on technique and reads and everything to be the guy that people expect him to be.
Yeah, I agree. I won't be surprised at all to see Drew make a step. I think one thing last year too, and a lot of Penn State fans, it was the ultimate debate. Is Drew underperforming or is it this wide receiver room pulling him down? Because there were plenty of times, especially against the Ohio State's Michigan of the world, he'd have time to throw the ball and nobody was open. Just nobody was getting separation. And then he would try and force passes in that would make it look like it was a worse throw than it was. I mean, like you said, I can understand why people thought his season was a disappointment with the amount of hoopla he had around him. But I'm with you where if you look at the stats, first year as a starter in the Big Ten, completes 60% of his passes, 2,600 yards, 25 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. That's really good for a first-year starter. Now, I do think, not all seasons like that are created equal because let's say he put up those exact same stats, but let's take what he did against Maryland and what he did against Ohio State and flip those games. You probably, even though his stats are identical, you look at his season a lot differently, right? So Drew would be the first person to tell you against the Ohio States, against the Michigans, this year, the Ohio State game when they go to Camp Randall, he's going to have to be better. He's going to have to be better. But I agree that I don't think it's outlandish to expect that jump. The kid's got all the arm talent in the world. The very lazy comparison for a lot of people last year became Christian Hackenberg, which I understand. Because you got the kid, 5-star recruit, Penn State, the quarterback, the big arm. But and this is not a knock on Hack either. If you just the difference in the pocket presence between the two and that sort of thing is night and day. Drew very rarely looked panicked in the pocket the way Hackenberg used to. The footwork was much better than it used to be with Hackenberg. So I didn't like that comparison. It was a comparison that happened. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see a big jump from Drew this year, especially if the receivers improve, which, I think, Julian Fleming is not the game breaker that he's projected to be in high school, but he's consistent, going to catch the ball, move the sticks for you. Trey Wallace, a guy we've talked about a lot on the show here over the course of last year. So if he's healthy, that's a big boost. These tight ends are really good. I think they're going to throw to the running backs a lot more in Andy Kotelnicki's offense. And also I think Kotelnicki, and not as a slight on Mike Yurcich, because I still think Mike Yurcich is a pretty good coach. His career results speak for themselves. He's put up points and yards everywhere he's gone. But Kotelnicki, I think, does a better job of kind of adjusting to what he has. With Yurcich, it was more of, I'm going to take these players and make them try and fit my system, rather they do or not, as opposed to Kotelnicki, where he can take what he has and make his system fit that. So I think that'll help as well. But yeah, I'm with you. I think I won't be surprised if Drew makes a jump. And again, while I can understand why some people saw last year's disappointment, and to an extent, I'm sure it kind of was, but your first year as a starting quarterback to complete 60% of your passes with 25 scores, only 2 interceptions, that's pretty solid.
But again, the most of that schedule is considered a given. So everybody watched Ohio State, Michigan, and those are the games that people and me in particular. I got to say, I was a little rough on the throw that wasn't made. So you'll remember it better than me. They're still able to beat Michigan at this point. It's a 1-score game. There's probably 4 minutes left in the game. He's got a wide open, I forget who it was, coming across the middle. He's probably thrown this route 300 times in the off season because it's just a drag right across the middle. The guy, it's like a 8-yard pass right over the middle and just it's
Mhm.
way behind him. Then that sets up fourth down, and whatever they did on fourth down was a debacle. It wasn't his
I
fault.
remember. Yeah, I remember that fourth down just being one of those plays where you just want to rip your hair out. I mean, it was made worse by the fact on third down. So if I remember correctly, I think it was Dante Cephas that was just wide open, and you hit him in stride there. Like you said, you might win that game. You might beat Michigan if you complete that pass. But yeah, and I think those are the areas where Drew needs to improve, and some of that, excuse me, I think came from where one thing Penn State did with him last year that I understood but I didn't love was I think they really, and part of this was because of the defense they had. They knew they could play this way on offense, probably be okay. Was, hey, be smart, don't turn the ball over, yada, yada, yada. So when the opportunities were there to take those shots, I think it made him a little gun shy because they were so big on smart throws, don't turn it over, don't take risk. And I think that was part of what you saw in a play like that, where when that play was there, he got the big eyes and then rushed it a little bit. And I think a big part of that is going to be, slowing the game down, which in year two as a starter typically happens for a quarterback anyway. And again, that's part of the reason why I'm not going to be surprised if we see him make a jump. But yeah, it's ultimately, I think things have to go pretty sideways, rather it be injuries, guys really underperforming, whatever it is for Penn State to miss the playoff this year. But if they're going to do anything in the playoff, it's going to hinge on Drew, which, hey, it's football. It's almost always going to hinge on your quarterback. But I really do think that this is a team that, I mean, do I think they're built to win a national championship this year? No, but I think they're capable of getting the playoff and maybe winning a game or two if Drew reaches his ceiling and plays to that potential. So, again, I know it's not exactly, rocket science or anything to say it, or a scorching hot take to say that team's going to go as far as their quarterback, but I truly believe Penn State will go as far as Drew Allar this year. And if Drew takes that step, this is a team that I think can get to the playoffs and make a little bit of noise once they're there. And again, like I said, if they miss the playoffs, especially with the schedule, because it's not an overly challenging schedule, 10-2 probably gets them in. I think if they miss it, either there were a lot of injuries or something went severely haywire in terms of guys underperforming or something like that.
Buckeye Battle Cry makes a comment here about James Franklin quarterbacks not improving outside of Trace McSorley. Now, we got to understand that these guys have had the job for so long. He hasn't really had that many quarterbacks because Clifford
Yeah,
was
he
there for
really
so
hasn't.
long, McSorley there so long, and now Aller. Like, it seems like they've had like 4 quarterbacks, and Hackenberg, of course. So, just my question was going to be basically when you look at USC, Lincoln Riley, and formerly Oklahoma, Ryan Day at Ohio State, there's very much um, a perspective that because of the acumen of the coach, that they have a significant impact on the quarterback, and they're known for molding quarterbacks. Does James Franklin, is he looked upon as having much influence on the quarterback development?
I mean, I don't think he does. I know James in a lot of ways when it comes to this stuff is a very hands-off coach. He's very much a CEO type. I'm also going to disagree with the comment that Sean Clifford didn't improve because any ask any Penn State fan, 2019 Sean Clifford and 2023 Sean Clifford, or 2022 Sean Clifford, excuse me, were two very different quarterbacks. I mean, I know in the middle of his career there, Sean kind of dipped a little bit, but his last year on campus, he was much, much better than he had been at any point in his career. So I don't think that's fair to say. But yeah, a quarterback has always kind of been the bugaboo with James, right? How many times have we found ourselves at the end of the season saying, man, Penn State is a quarterback away. They're a quarterback away. And like you said, he really hasn't had that many quarterbacks because Hack was a starter for 2 years. McSorley was a 3-year starter. Cliff was a 4-year starter. And now on to Drew Allar. And I mean, I know, Will Levis got a couple starts mixed in there in 2020, but that 2020 season across the board for so many reasons, I just block it out and throw it away because it was pointless for a lot of reasons, obviously. But yeah, I mean, I don't think James plays a big role in the quarterback development. I mean, obviously he plays a role in identifying the guys and who they're going to bring into the program and that sort of thing. But when it comes to that sort of stuff, he puts a lot on his assistants. He trusts his assistants. Um, so yeah, I know he gets a bit of a bad rep for quarterbacks under his watch, but I don't know how fair it is because at the same time, look at who these guys were. Sean Clifford was a 3-star recruit who, by all accounts, went on to have a pretty good college career. Trace McSorley is a guy that the reason he went to Penn State is because everybody else wanted him to be a safety. James Franklin was the only guy willing to let him play quarterback, and he became arguably the best quarterback in school history. Like, I don't think it's totally fair to knock him for that. If you want to knock on him for maybe some of the misses in recruiting for, when you had Justin Fields in the fold and couldn't close it out, or maybe this cycle where you have Matt Zollers, who's a borderline 5-star guy who's in state that you lost, I'll give you that. But in terms of the quarterback talent he's had on campus, I think James has done a pretty good job. And it's just a matter of they've never had that true, even for as good as Trace was, and I love him to death. He might be my favorite Penn State football player ever. They've never had that true game-changing, game-breaker kind of quarterback. They've never had their Trevor Williams, their Caleb Williams, or Trevor Lawrence, Caleb Williams, that guy. And, another comparison that's made a lot is James Franklin and Dabo Swinney. And Clemson was always Clemson until Deshaun Watson came along, right? And Penn State, I think, under James Franklin and pre-Deshaun, Clemson are very similar, where they're just right there so close and can't make that jump. And the hope has always kind of been that Drew would be their Deshaun Watson. And I will say, I think if Drew has a big year moving forward, quarterback at Penn State can look a lot different, because usually if you get that one guy that comes along and turns into that high draft pick, the recognizable guy at quarterback, that makes your program a lot more attractive to this other high-end quarterback. So I think, again, that's where Drew's just so important to this whole thing, because I think if he does make that jump this year, and let's be honest, with his arm talent, even if he repeats last year, he may still be a first-round pick. I mean, for goodness sake, Christian Hackenberg was a disaster his last 2 years in college and got drafted like 50th overall or whatever it was, because teams are going to see that arm talent and see that ability Drew has and think, hey, we can get this guy right, and he can be our franchise quarterback. So if he's able to make improvements this year and take a jump, you can pretty much Sharpie him in as a first-round pick with his natural ability. And once that happens, that just changes the entire perception of your program at quarterback, because, again, happened with Clemson with Deshaun Watson. So, excuse me, like I said, I know James definitely has a bit of a bad rep when it comes to quarterbacks. I think some of it's warranted and justified, but I also think some of it is not justified. And again, in my opinion, for the quarterback talent he's had, he's done a pretty good job, especially Clifford and McSorley. Like I said, 2 3-star guys, one of which most schools didn't even want as a quarterback. And they came here and both went on to win a lot of football games, win big bowl games, both played in a Rose Bowl. And I think he's done a pretty good job, all things considered, on that front.